In 2025, something happened inside China that the entire world missed. Not a missile launch, not a sanctions package, not a diplomatic collapse. Something quieter, something slower, something far more permanent. And when I show you the number, just one single number at the end of this video, I think you will never look at China the same way again. Stay with me, because that reveal is coming, and it will change how you understand everything happening in the world right now. Let me ask you something. When you think about China's biggest problem today, what comes to mind? The war, the tariffs, the tension with the West, maybe Taiwan? That is what the headlines want you to think about. But here is what the analysts inside Beijing's own research institutions are quietly whispering to each other right now. The war is a distraction. The tariffs are a distraction. The real crisis, the one that was already terminal before the first shot was ever fired, is happening inside China's own borders, inside its own economy, inside its own households, and it cannot be fixed with a ceasefire. It cannot be reversed with a stimulus package. It cannot be negotiated away at a summit. Because what China is facing right now is not a political problem. It is a structural collapse. 4 of them, actually, converging at exactly the same moment. And I am going to walk you through all 4, step by step, with real numbers, no spin, no propaganda from either side. Because here's the truth. The gap between what is being reported about China and what is actually happening inside China has become genuinely dangerous for investors, for governments, for ordinary people trying to understand the world they live in. So let us start at the beginning. In 2025, China recorded 7.9 million births and 11.3 million deaths. That is a net loss of 3.4 million human beings in a single year, the steepest annual population decline since the Great Famine of 1960. And this is not a one-year anomaly. This is the 4th consecutive year of population decline. Now, I know what you were thinking. Demographics sounds boring. Demographics sounds like something professors argue about in journals nobody reads. But let me show you what demographics actually means in plain language. Every factory needs workers. Every pension system needs young people paying in. Every consumer economy needs people buying things. China is running out of all of them simultaneously. China's fertility rate has collapsed to approximately 1.0 births per woman. You need 2.1 just to keep a population stable. China is at less than half of that. By 2050, China could lose 250 million people from its current population. That is nearly the entire United States gone from one country in 25 years. And here is the detail that makes this uniquely catastrophic. Japan aged after it got rich. South Korea aged after it became a high-income economy. China is aging while 600 million of its citizens still live on less than $2,000 a year. Beijing tried to reverse it. They ended the one-child policy. They offered cash payments for second and third children. Nothing worked. Because young Chinese people looked at the cost of housing, the cost of raising a child, the brutal work culture, and they said no. Demographics is destiny, and China's demographic destiny is already written. Crisis 2. The wealth has been destroyed. For decades in China, real estate was not just an industry, it was the entire economy. At its peak, property accounted for roughly 30% of GDP. And for ordinary Chinese families, their apartment was everything. Their retirement, their children's inheritance, their entire financial identity. 65% of Chinese household wealth was locked inside real estate. And now, that wealth is gone. Property investment fell over 17% in 2025. Residential sales hit their lowest level since 2015. An estimated 80 million homes sit vacant or unsold across the country. More than 60 major developers have defaulted or entered restructuring. China Vanke, one of the most trusted developers in the nation, is now struggling under $51 billion in debt. Imagine you're a family in Chengdu or Hefei. You saved for a decade. You put everything into one apartment. That apartment has lost 25% of its value. You still owe the full mortgage. Your wealth has been destroyed, but your debt is still there. Millions of Chinese mortgages are now underwater. The debt is worth more than the property itself. When that happens to a population, something breaks, something psychological, something fundamental. People stop spending, stop investing, stop believing tomorrow will be better than today. Which brings us directly to the third crisis. Crisis 3. Nobody believes anymore. Chinese consumers are refusing to spend. Household savings have surged 50% since 2021. Retail sales growth is barely above 1%. Consumer prices are essentially flat. Headline inflation in 2025 was 0%. This is what economists call a balance sheet recession. It is precisely what destroyed Japan in the 1990s. Property collapses, household wealth evaporates, people stop spending, businesses stop investing. The entire economy enters a slow, grinding deflation that lasts not months, not years, decades. Japan has been trapped in this pattern for over 30 years. And China's situation is actually worse than Japan's was, because Japan was already wealthy when its bubble burst. Youth unemployment in China officially hit 18.9% in 2025, and that's the official number. Reality is almost certainly higher. 12 million new university graduates entered the job market last year, competing for jobs that increasingly do not exist. A record 3.7 million young Chinese took the civil service exam because government employment is the only stable option left. PhD graduates are delivering food. A generation that was promised the Chinese dream is waking up to something very different. Crisis 4. The government is running out of ammunition. And here is where it all ties together. Beijing knows about crises 1, 2, and 3. They're not blind, and they've been trying to spend their way out of the problem, but the problem is now bigger than their ability to spend. The overall government deficit reached 9% of GDP in 2025. Tax revenues grew by less than 1%. Local governments, the ones actually responsible for delivering services to 1.4 billion people, are drowning in hidden debt estimated at 60 trillion yuan. That is 8.2 trillion US dollars, nearly 48% of GDP. And those local governments funded themselves for decades by selling land to developers who have now collapsed. That revenue stream is gone. Civil servants in some regions are having their wages cut. Suppliers are not getting paid. Public services are quietly being reduced. The government that was supposed to rescue the economy is itself running out of road.
Now, remember that number I promised you at the beginning? Here it is. When Japan entered its lost decade in the 1990s, its great economic stagnation, Japan was the world's second largest economy, just as China is today. Japan had a burst property bubble, just as China has today. Japan saw its consumers stop spending and its young people lose faith, just as China is experiencing today. And Japan never fully recovered. 3 decades later, it is still dealing with the consequences. But here is the number that should stop you cold. When Japan stalled, the world had China to absorb the shock. China became the global growth engine while Japan stagnated. China's rise essentially rescued the world economy from Japan's collapse. If China now enters its own lost decade, and the structural evidence suggests it already has, there is no next China. India is growing but is not yet large enough. Southeast Asia is dynamic but fragmented. Africa has potential but lacks the infrastructure. Nobody is ready to absorb what China currently provides to the world economy. The world you grew up in, cheap Chinese goods flowing to every corner of the planet, Chinese demand driving commodity prices, Chinese investment building infrastructure across 3 continents, that world is structurally over. Not because of the war, not because of tariffs, because the engine that powered it, cheap labor, a growing population, cheap investment, a property market that made people feel wealthy enough to spend, that engine has broken down from the inside. And the nations, the businesses, and the individuals who understand this transition now will be in a fundamentally stronger position than those still waiting for China to bounce back. Because it is not bouncing back. It is transforming into something the world has never seen before. The first collapse of a middle-income superpower in the age of globalization. And that transformation will reshape the global economy for the rest of your lifetime. Subscribe for more analysis like this, explained in plain English every single week. And tell me in the comments, do you think China can escape its lost decade, or is the structural damage already too deep to reverse? I'll see you in the next one.